photographer.
Hello.
Extraordinaire. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to wait a little bit longer for people to tune in as well. We are going to talk about this arrest affidavit for Barry Morphew.
It's massive. Look at that.
It's been out for over a week. If you haven't read it, you should.
It's very long, so give yourself time.
Yeah, I heard someone told me on Twitter it took them 7 hours to read it out loud.
Oh boy.
It's a long time.
That's a very long time.
So we both have read it, and I've taken notes. You've taken notes. So we wanted to hop on here, kind of give, give out information that maybe if you haven't read it, you learned some new information that wasn't said in the preliminary hearing. Again, Barry Morphew, he is presumed innocent until a jury finds him guilty or not guilty. So I just wanted to put that out there. So where are you guys coming in from? Where are you watching from? Everyone's saying welcome. Welcome in. All right, well, let's get into it. It's a lot, right? Are you starting to read comments? California, Indiana. Let us know if you've read the entire thing or if you've only read a little bits of it. We're gonna go over
McFlurry Queens, yeah.
Sweet. All right, so, in the preliminary hearing, Barry Morphew's attorneys mentioned that this arrest affidavit was like a tabloid, that it was really written for the public and the media, and it wasn't written for the court.
Yeah.
This affidavit, it had sections. There was clear titles of interviews, photos that correlated to the statements.
Timestamps of when interviews were done, different things like that.
Yeah. And from everything in here, I mentioned every time Barry Morphew was interviewed by an investigator. So I'm going to read those dates real quickly. May 11th, May 13th, May 21st, May 28th, June 2nd, June 3rd, June 17th, June 25th, July 1st, July 8th, January 27th, January 28th, February 28th, February 29th, March 1st, March 5th, March 10th, April 5th, April 22nd, and then again, he was arrested May 5th of 2021.
That was 19 times.
So I'm sure there was other times where it was a quicker interview and they didn't put it into the arrest affidavit. And again, this is just to show that there's probable cause for an arrest.
Yeah.
So there could be a lot more evidence not in this.
Yeah.
There could be, and obviously Suzanne Morphew has not been found, her body. So it's an ongoing investigation. They're continuing to following up on tips. There were mentions of evidence that they haven't gotten the data back, like the Bobcat, the Range Rover, Suzanne's vehicle. So I think there's still a lot more evidence that it's not in here. Yeah. So we don't know yet. Again, this is a no body case, and there were no witnesses of the crime. And I've worked on Patrick Frazie's case. This is a person in Teller County, Colorado. He was found guilty of murder of his fiance back around Thanksgiving of, I want to say 2019. Anyways,
so, yeah.
And that was a no body case, and he was still found guilty of that. But they did have a witness to the cleanup of the murder, supposedly, of his alleged girlfriend who helped clean up the crime scene. So she was a key witness in that case. And then there's Dante Lucas in Pueblo, where his girlfriend and pregnant girlfriend, I should say, Kelsey Schilling, went missing was it 9 years ago? It was many
Long
years
time
ago.
ago, yeah.
Her body's still not been found.
Yep.
And he was just recently found guilty of the crime of murder. So,
And his was primarily based off of cell phone data, text messages, where the phones were pinging like different towers, a lot of telematic
credit card
stuff.
uses
Yeah.
of hers, things like that. But
Yeah.
anyways, so for people to say that, you know, this case won't go to trial or this case won't, there won't be a conviction, I mean, because there's no body, that doesn't mean that at all.
Yeah.
So let's get into it, I guess.
It's 129 pages, so we'll see how far we get. We're not going to go page by page or even paragraph by paragraph. We're just going to kind of summarize a lot of the key points because this would take us hours to go into depth.
People have asked me, you know, why did it take so long for an arrest to be made? And you got to remember, there were over 1,400 tips made to CBI from May of 2020 until April 26th of 2021. There's multiple agencies involved. And the investigation was across state lines, multiple state lines. I mean, again, they even said in this arrest affidavit, there are some of those tips that are ongoing, that they're still investigating, they're still looking into. But in the affidavit, it says that none of those tips that they hadn't looked into further was enough. It didn't substantiate anyone as a legitimate alternative suspect or to counter the evidence against Barry Morphew. So, also something to point out was that there was no evidence obtained of any outgoing calls, text messages, vehicle movements, sightings by video, or even people that witnessed Suzanne, other than Barry Morphew, that witnessed Suzanne left the house after May 8th at 7:06 p.m. And again, the story initially was that Suzanne went on a bike ride early Sunday, Mother's Day, and just didn't come home.
Yeah.
So also, it definitely states that early on into the investigation, the deputies and CBI agents knew that something criminal had gone on.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest things they pointed out was initially upon arriving on the scene, and a lot of people that they include in this affidavit even said the same thing too. When word got out about the bike and how it looked, where it was placed, different things like that, the fact that the helmet was up the road, a lot of people immediately thought that that was a staged scene. Investigators, officers, everybody immediately thought that this doesn't look right, so they thought something criminal had happened because it didn't look normal.
And even one of Barry Morphew's buddies, George Davis, told agents that first week that he thought the scene had been staged for the bike.
Yeah.
So, also, within a month of Suzanne's disappearance, Barry Morphew began to liquidate their assets. That was another major thing that happened. So let's go into it. Okay, so page 1. Suzanne took clear and articulable steps in January of 2020 to separate from Barry Morphew and divorce Barry Morphew. That's according to this arrest affidavit.
And that was through text messages, things that she had said in arguments that were recorded on the spy pen, which we'll get to later. But it wasn't just, she brought it up one time in an angry argument and that was it. There were multiple occasions where things were mentioned about divorce.
And throughout this arrest affidavit and interviews after May 10th, Barry Morphew changed critical details about his activities in the 2 p.m. hour on May 9th and onwards, as far as what happened. And that can be found on page 2. I have all my notes exactly with the correlating page. If you guys want to, I can copy my notes and post them to this article if there's something that caught your attention or something and you want to look back at the arrest affidavit. I can post that. Just let me know.
Or if you've got it in front of you like we do, you can follow along.
Yeah. Okay. May 10th statement from Martin Ritter. Now, Martin Ritter is a neighbor of Suzanne Morphew, who he went over and checked on Suzanne, but his wife was the initial person to go check on Suzanne to see if she was at the house, what was going on, things like that. And the couple, Jean and Martin Ritter, were the ones to call Chaffee County Sheriff's Office to inform them that they couldn't find Suzanne, they needed help for a welfare check. So this conversation, this statement that Martin Ritter told investigators was that why he was calling was because Barry Morphew had told him that he was on his way back from Denver and he did not have cell service. And me being from that area where Barry Morphew was working on the wall, I mean, I'm from that area, grew up there, and that area has great cell phone service. So that was interesting to me.
Yeah.
Since I'm from that area. Do you want to talk about the next one?
I just want to say, too, if you hear noises in the background, it's my dogs, so I apologize.
It's okay. Another interesting thing that we hadn't really heard in the preliminary hearing was that one of the deputies had tried to contact Morphew at 6:05 p.m. and he didn't pick up. But according to his call records, he was talking to Mallory and other people on the phone as well.
Yeah.
So, and then they try to contact him again at 7:10 p.m. and he did pick up.
And one of the key things about this, kind of like she mentioned him changing his story and timelines and different things of that sort, is that initially when he got the call, it was around 5 p.m. and he told Jean Ritter that he was working at the job site, which then investigators later found out from looking at the hotel surveillance video that he was sitting in his hotel room at that time. And he still didn't even leave the hotel until almost 6 o'clock, almost an hour later.
Yeah.
He didn't even leave the hotel room until an hour after getting the call that his wife was missing.
I think his pickup was seen on surveillance leaving the hotel parking lot at like 6:12, I want to say. So an interesting thing when the deputies were asking him about the bike, what does Suzanne's bike look like on the phone? Initially, Morphew told investigators that it was a turquoise bike helmet, and she also had a matching windbreaker jacket. And he also mentions her cell phone, that she would have taken it with her when she goes bike riding. And again, that cell phone has never been found.
Yep.
I think it's really interesting to figure out from looking at the photos in the arrest affidavit, as well as the information to know what she typically has on her when she rides the bike, as well as what she had in the house that are missing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pieces of evidence that are just missing. And it's if you think there was an abduction, as far as if Suzanne was taken from the house, why are those particular items taken from the house?
Yeah.
If it was a break-in, like if someone wanted to take her, and some of the theories is sex trafficking, or she's down in a basement, and things like that. Why would the person that took her take those items, like a cell phone charger and a towel and things that she was she had all the time, or at least the towel was in the photo, that was her last proof of life, but the cell phone charger that's with it, but then she left her purse and personal items and things like that. Okay. This was really interesting, and I want to know more about. It's one of the deputies noticed barefoot marks inside the bucket of the Bobcat. I want to know, was this photographed? Was there a cast made of the bucket? It's also noted that there was they noticed the cutting blade, the nuts, and the bolts were newly replaced. So I want to know more about this Bobcat as far as, was that photographed? Was it printed? Did someone, like, when people can do like fingerprints, casting, and stuff like that. So that was on page 5. Talked about that.
And one of the key things that everyone noticed immediately when they got to the bike scene was the fact that there was no damage to anything. There was no damage to the bike. There was no damage to the hill that it was on. None of the grass, looked like it had been ripped up. Nothing looked out of the ordinary. So that was a big point of interest for investigators when they were looking at the initial scene, was the fact that if Suzanne had fallen, if she had been pushed, or anything like that, if that was the actual case, the bike would have had scratch marks on it, things would have been dented, broken, different things of that sort. If she had fallen down that hill, we've both been there. I don't know how many of you guys have actually been to the scene of that. It's a very steep hill, and it's not flat. There's a lot of rocks and trees and different things like that. So if she had fallen, that was one of the things they noticed. There would have probably been blood or something of that sort, more of her DNA on the surrounding area, because that would have been a pretty rough fall.
Morphew told law enforcement that Suzanne took bike rides regularly and leaves from 8 a.m. until 9 a.m. And there are statements in the arrest affidavit from friends saying that that timeline is strange, because when she posted photos of herself on bike rides, they were always in the afternoon, after 2 o'clock. And she would post, where she was, and, friends of hers were wondering, like, there were no pictures of her on this bike ride on Mother's Day. And so that's something she would typically do when she did take bike rides. And this is something also that we find out through the arrest affidavit, that she was pretty new to mountain biking. It wasn't like she had done this for many, many years. She had recently just gotten the bike. Let's talk about the dispatch learned that same day that Suzanne's cell phone was last pinged, or last known activity was at 4:23 a.m., 11 and a half miles west of a cell phone tower in Poncha Springs. And so when they had that information, which is day one, and the information from Barry Morphew saying, I saw her in bed at 5 o'clock when I left to go to Denver, that didn't make sense, because her last cell phone ping was at 4:23 a.m., not at the Morphew residence, is what they're pretty much saying.
Plus, like she just mentioned, she always brought her phone on her bike rides. She wasn't riding her bike at 4 o'clock in the morning because Barry saw her in bed at 5. And so even if she did go on this bike ride, why was that the last time that her phone pinged so early in the morning, and not when she was up, moving around, texting people, getting her day started?
Also, I'm sure investigators searched that area where the cell phone last pinged, because they've been searching a really long time. Another point of interest, or something that's interesting, is that, we had mentioned that Barry Morphew left the hotel room at 6, or left the hotel in Broomfield at 6:12 p.m. and gets to the bike scene at 8:42 p.m. This is also interesting, is a sergeant interviewed Mallory, which is the oldest daughter, and she said to investigators that she last spoke with Suzanne the night of May 9th, and that she had texted, and had texted her Happy Mother's Day. I was like, what does HMD stand for? I took notes and did abbreviations and can't even read what I'm saying. Anyways, but she had texted Suzanne Happy Mother's Day and didn't get a response. And when she tried calling, it went straight to voicemail. But what's interesting is that when investigators looked back at Suzanne's call records and her phone activity, her text messages, there was no call from Suzanne to Mallory, or Mallory to Suzanne, the night of May 9th.
Her last communication to anybody. Her cell phone pinged it, around 4 a.m. the day that she went missing, but the last time that there was actually activity on it was around
From her.
Yeah,
sure.
from her phone was around 2 p.m. on Saturday, and that was a message she sent to Jeff Libler. Other than that, no calls, no apps being open, no text messages, nothing after that time period on Saturday.
And then Mallory denied issues between Suzanne and Morphew, but Macy admitted they argued a lot and feared that they would separate or get a divorce. This is page 6 of the affidavit. Macy said that there was no plan for Holly and Mallory to stay at the house when they got back from their road trip. This is page 6, and that's something to note because when investigators go into the home and do a search warrant, they find bed sheets that are in the dryer, and Mallory's bed is not made. The one bed in the whole entire house is not made as Mallory's. And Barry Morphew said that Holly spends the night in Mallory's bed, and Suzanne was getting it ready for them to spend the night to stay over once they got back from their road trip. This was interesting also. Jean Ritter went to the house 3 times and sent, first she was sent by Mallory. Second, she was sent by Barry to specifically look for a bike. And the third, to leave a note for Suzanne in case she returned. And that was on page 7. And again, Jean Ritter is the neighbor of, and Martin and Jean Ritter are on the no contact list ordered by the court for Barry Morphew.
Yeah.
There's multiple witnesses that are on that list. And if you didn't know, Barry Morphew is out on a $500,000 bond, but his case is going to trial. The judge found that there was probable cause to move the first-degree murder charge, as well as the tampering with a deceased body and charges to be bound over to a trial, so that they're thinking that the trial will be set in May of 2022, but of course that could always change if there's continuances and things like that. Okay, so May 11th interview. Barry Morphew said that his wife rides her mountain bike every day. Wednesday, they found her bike helmet 0.84 miles northwest of the bike site. The Camelback was left in the Range Rover, and all pictures of Suzanne biking show her wearing it, so likely investigators believe that she didn't take a bike ride that day. This was on page 9. So really early on, they did not believe the bike story.
Yeah.
Because of the Camelback and because of the evidence found in her car.
Yeah.
Another thing that was really interesting was that one of Suzanne's best friends, Sheila Oliver, she would contact her every single day. They would communicate through Snapchat or calling and things like that. And Suzanne had not read 3 Snapchat messages from Sheila Oliver on Saturday. They were left at 6:40 and 6:48 p.m. that Saturday. So this is a whole 24 hours before Suzanne was even reported missing.
Yeah.
And her friend Sheila thought that was strange.
Especially because Sheila's
daughter,
Hannah, was getting married the Sunday that Suzanne went missing, and Suzanne was initially supposed to go to the wedding, but because of COVID, they were going to do a virtual thing, and they had been talking about it so much. Sheila considered her like another daughter, like they were very, very close, and Suzanne was very excited about this. And so Sheila just thought it was very odd that Suzanne, they had been talking constantly up until that day, and then they just stopped all communication. Suzanne wasn't even opening the Snapchats anymore the day before the wedding that she was very excited for.
In a text message conversation with Sheila, she had said that it's Jekyll and Hyde, again, referring to Barry Morphew and his personalities and how he acted. She even admitted in that conversation, which is on March 25th, that she had a conversation with Barry Morphew about divorce. And later on in the interviews with investigators, Morphew tells investigators that never happened, that he never had a conversation with divorce. And if that was a conversation, then he would listen to her and let her go.
And I know Suzanne had a hard time with this because she did bring this up to Macy. Her name is scratched out in the affidavit, but she later says that she had a conversation like that with her 16-year-old, which, would obviously imply that that's Macy. But Macy even mentioned Suzanne getting a restraining order against Barry, and she pretty much begged Suzanne to divorce him. So Macy because she lived at home, was very aware of the issues that were going on between her parents, and I think she just wanted them to both be happy, whether that meant working on it or separating. But at the end of the day, I think she just wanted them to figure something out so that they weren't fighting all the time.
There is an important text that I'll get to that Macy, the youngest daughter, sent to her boyfriend the day of Suzanne going missing. And I'll get to that. But right now I'm on page 11 if you're following along. Sheila was concerned about Barry Morphew's behavior. And so her and Suzanne had been talking. Suzanne asked Sheila to buy a spy pen so that she could record the conversations that was had between the couple. And so Suzanne had purchased it, but had sent it to Sheila's house so that Sheila could give it to her in Florida in January of 2020.
And that way it wasn't delivered to their house, so Barry didn't know that she was buying it.
On page 11, this is really important. Barry Morphew suspected that Suzanne had a boyfriend before they got married. Not even just during their relationship, before they got married. Suzanne had realized what a narcissist Morphew was and told her sister, Melinda. This is page 11. In that text message Suzanne had sent just a couple days before she went missing, she had said, he's been abusive, emotionally, physically, and she's angry. Suzanne is angry at what she allowed, as far as how long the relationship had gone on, and she didn't seek help.
And I know a lot of people were like, because we even talked about it when we first started covering this, and a lot of the stories we did, that a lot of people said, they were this incredible family, they lived this great life, they were always happy and stuff.
Perfect couple.
Yeah. And her sister in the affidavit says they lived a phony life and would often put on a front as if they were happy together. And I think that's because Suzanne would, tell her what was happening behind the scenes, but then they would go on trips and take pictures, and obviously the behind the scenes wasn't shown to the public as to what they were dealing with at home.
And I feel like that happens in so many people. Like if you go on Facebook, people don't necessarily talk about the bad things that happen in relationships or friendships and things like that. And so
they show the good times and the smiling pictures, not what's really going on underneath.
So the last interaction between Barry Morphew, I'm talking about Barry Morphew and Jeff Libler, was in college, when they were in college, and Barry Morphew found out that that Jeff Libler, and Suzanne had hooked up at a party in college, which allegedly led Morphew to get really angry at him at a golf course that Barry Morphew was working at and Jeff Libler was playing at. And Jeff Libler said, quote, "You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose everything." When Jeff Libler was talking to investigators and telling them about this story and saying that Barry Morphew looked like he wanted to beat me down, is what a quote he said. This is on page 14 if you're following.
And then Libler didn't talk to Suzanne after that until she reached out to him in 2018. Yeah.
Libler had said Suzanne would tell him that when she does leave Barry Morphew, that she would go without contacting him, meaning contacting Jeff Libler, and that she was not doing this for Jeff Libler but herself.
Yeah.
And that he also said he doesn't believe Suzanne reached out to him with the intention of having a boyfriend. He describes Suzanne as naive because she assumed the best in people and did not see what lies beneath.
Yeah.
Page 16. Okay. So I highlighted this in my notes in the May 13th interview. This is the first time Barry Morphew was asked to voluntarily submit a polygraph examination, but he declined and didn't want to do anything that wasn't, quote, 100% accurate or weren't admissible in court.
Yeah.
And this is interesting to me because when I did my interview with him in September or late August, he told me he was never asked to take a polygraph.
Yep.
And you've listened to those interviews and you remember that.
Yeah. Which obviously was odd for us to hear considering
and we
it's
didn't
an investigation.
Know.
Yeah, we took him at his word. Yeah.
And then throughout this affidavit, he's asked other times to do a polygraph or even conversations.
One,
Anyway, so May 21st interview, Barry Morphew refers to Suzanne in the past tense. He says, I just wish that you knew how amazing she was. And throughout my interview with Barry Morphew, he switched it to past tense and current tense. Present tense. Couldn't think of it. So that was interesting that even May 21st, that's like 11 days after Suzanne went missing, he's already talking about her in past tense.
And that was something they brought up in the preliminary hearing that they thought was really odd too, that it wasn't that long after she was still considered a missing person and he was already implying she was gone by talking in the past tense. So that definitely caught investigators' attention as well when he said things like that.
So I'm already on page 22. And this was an interesting quote. There's a lot of sex talk in the affidavit.
Yeah.
And one thing that Barry Morphew had said was, we, in talking about men, need sex. That's all we need and we'll be good.
Yeah.
There was another statement he made to investigators allegedly saying that he set an alarm for 4:30 a.m. There was no alarm set.
Yep.
According to data from the phone.
This was on Sunday morning.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that he woke up on his own without an alarm. That's something he said in a later statement. So his statements were contradicting to each other.
And then even after that, he implied that he did have an alarm, but it wasn't on his phone. It was just like a normal alarm clock. So there were a lot of different answers to something that you would think would be pretty easy. Like, I know when I set my alarm, it's always on my phone.
I have both.
But would you know which one woke you up?
Well, some days I need to be woken up better than other days, so I use a different alarm clock.
Reinforcements.
But, yeah. And sometimes I just wake up, but typically no.
Yeah.
Okay, back to May 21st interview. Morphew was asked about why his employees smelled chlorine from the Broomfield hotel room the night of Sunday, May 10th.
Yeah.
And he said that he had no idea why, and that maybe the hotel staff used it to clean because of COVID.
Yeah.
But he told me that he smelt it too. When I did the interview with him, after I had interviewed Jeff Puckett, one of the employees that worked at the Broomfield job that was called at last minute to come help, he had told me that he smelt it and it was so bad his eyes started watering. Morgan Gentile told me that, it hit you like as soon as you walked in, it hit you like a brick of, a wall. And then he told me himself, he smelt it.
Yeah.
So reasons why Morphew left Morgan Gentile. So Morgan and Gentile and Barry Morphew were supposed to ride up together Sunday evening.
Yeah.
And the reason why he told investigators that he didn't want to ride with her was because she smokes.
Yeah. And he didn't want her smoking in his car.
But remember that the day before, Saturday, he picked her up for the job at the river off of County Road 105, and they worked on that job Saturday morning. So he was okay with her to ride in his car
on Saturday,
on
but
Saturday,
not
but not Sunday. And this was something Gentile never knew. She never found out why, she was left on Sunday.
Yeah.
She never was given a reason. So on May 28th interview, Morphew said he has not used the tranquilizer or darts in Colorado, and that the darts' purpose was to tranquilize bucks to sell them. This is page 23. And later, he changes that.
Yep.
Totally. He says he uses it to...
all the time.
Yeah, to shoot...
chipmunks.
No.
And
to
deer.
shoot deer and get their horns.
Yeah.
So, and he did it in the breezeway of the house, is what he told investigators later on.
And he said he would do it in the garage too, if he saw one of them out there.
On the June 2nd interview, Morphew said Suzanne might leave him, but never leave her daughters. Also agreed that an animal attack and accident was unlikely based on the position of the bike and helmet. So already by June 2nd, he has changed his theory. He does not believe that there was an animal attack like he initially thought. But my question is, when was Tyson Draper's interview? Because in that interview, where Tyson Draper just met him at the side of the road or whatever, and Barry Morphew tells him that's where the bike was found, and he starts going over some of his theories. I believe that was late June. So that was after he had already told investigators he thought that the animal attack was unlikely.
Yeah.
So why would you go ahead and say that to someone?
Revert back to that.
Yeah. On page 24, Morphew told Agent Grusing he thought Suzanne was abducted, and that Grusing told Barry the last similar violent act that had occurred in the Salida area happened in 1980.
Yeah.
But you have to also remember, this was the time of COVID. It was shut down. This is early on. May 10th was early on with everyone, not working at their, business. They were, forced to stay at their house and things like that.
I thought it was interesting too that Agent Grusing also told Barry that this looked, from the beginning, like an intimate partner homicide, and Barry didn't object when he said that, which I think is interesting because,
so another thing from June's 2nd interview. He said that Morphew only wrote convict for his response on what should happen to the person responsible for Suzanne's disappearance. He replied to Grusing, it should be convicted and held responsible. And also in that interview, he said that regarding May 9th afternoon, Morphew said, just kind of sat out in the sun, had a good day, grilled steaks that evening. She was perfectly fine because there was no alcohol in her. But then later on, he when he looked at the last proof of life photo and had found out that was the photo that she had sent her lover, Jeff Libler,
on Saturday,
that she looked drunk.
Yeah.
But then in this interview, he's saying that there was no alcohol in her. In June 3rd interview, Morphew said Suzanne was naked the last time he saw her, but that changes through the year-long investigation. Sometimes he says that she's wearing pajamas. Sometimes he just can't remember. I don't recall.
It even gets to the point towards the end where he doesn't even remember physically seeing her. He just says that he saw like a lump in the sheets. He can't even remember actually looking at her and physically seeing her body in there.
All right. June 17th interview. When questioned of anything recently might have been a first for Suzanne, Morphew said that she started taking THC, CBD edibles, and oils about a month before she left from a guy in Westcliff named Tim. This was actually whom she was buying drugs, is a viable suspect. So he starts putting the blame on this guy that sells her oils and edibles. And later on, they interview this Tim guy. So we can talk about that a little later. So we're on page 26 now. June 25th interview. Morphew suggests the Mormons are involved in somehow in her disappearance, and mentioned that they had a marijuana business, and maybe they're responsible for the disappearance, and even referred to Suzanne's sister as wicked. And David as being smart enough to do something like this. He's brilliant. And in my interviews with Barry Morphew, he had mentioned this. And he wanted me to investigate that very heavily. And I said I would. And I also told him, I said, wouldn't you think that by now, if they really thought that they were suspect, that they would have arrested them, and they're still doing their business, their marijuana business. It's really a hemp business in Indiana and Michigan. And he asked me not to publicize that, and I didn't. I didn't put that in my stories back then, and he appreciated that.
I thought it was interesting too, because when he was kind of calling out Suzanne's family, implying that they had something to do with this, he says sometimes when people are guilty, then they point the finger because of their guilt. And there's a footnote at the bottom of the affidavit from investigators that says he seems not to realize that he seems to be doing the very thing he is explaining that is supposed to indicate a person is guilty. So I thought that that was very interesting, because I feel like throughout the affidavit, there's a lot of times where he kind of contradicts what he's saying, or it's kind of ironic because he implies someone else is doing something and doesn't realize that he's actually doing that himself as well.
And in this June 25th interview with investigators, he already points to a possible affair that Suzanne was having. He suggests that a guy named Kurt Sibler was having an affair with Suzanne, and that he never looked at Suzanne's phone because he did not want to lose her trust, but that she looked at that Suzanne had looked at Barry's phone all the time. This is again page 26. So in early June, he's already thinking or suggesting that Suzanne is having an affair with someone else. But later on, he's telling investigators multiple times he had no idea Suzanne would have an affair. That's just not like her. That's not her character.
She's a saint. She would never do that to her family, hurt her family like that, do anything.
But again, in June, he's already
very early on
asking investigators, have you talked to Kurt? He could be having an affair with Suzanne. This is another sex comment. Morphew went on to say that Suzanne's body's like a 30-year-old, and that they, being women, give us sex, and that's all we ever need, or ever want or need. July 1st interview. Morphew suggested Suzanne's siblings as an alternate suspect. So again, he's pushing that narrative that, have you looked at Suzanne's siblings? Because they were pointing the finger at him, like what you said in the Cliff Notes. July 8th interview, Morphew said that, he had gone to McDonald's, the only other place that he remembers going to on Mother's Day besides going to the hotel and going to the wall that he was supposed to work at. And at that time, I believe investigators already knew that that wasn't the case.
Because there were a lot of surveillance video, which we kind of talked about with the preliminary hearing. They showed him all the pictures of him making the different stops, which they labeled as trash runs.
And in this interview, he tells investigators, again, I'm pretty sure that when Gene Ritter called me, I was right there at the wall. But again, investigators had already known that that wasn't the case. They had gotten surveillance video, and he was actually in the hotel, doing who knows what. Morphew was asked twice if he took anything into the hotel room besides his backpack, and he replied that he did not. He also told agents that Suzanne never told him that she was done, and that she never said that she, in quotes, she never said that, and she loves her family too much. And by then, obviously, investigators knew that they got the surveillance video from the hotel, so they knew that he didn't just only take a backpack in there, and that they had already gotten the swiped images from his phone. That was one of them. He deleted the text from Suzanne on May 6th, saying that I'm done, I just want to do this civilly.
And that was one of the things we'll talk about later, but him switching his story a lot. he likes to say that he doesn't recall or he doesn't remember, but in another interview, he mentions that he has a pretty good memory. So it's just interesting that he's aware that he's not remembering a lot, but then contradicts it by saying that he has a really good memory. So you would think he would remember some of these details.
Page 27. We had 2 different plates that night. This is talking about Saturday, May 9th. The dinner that Barry Morphew and Suzanne allegedly, he says that they had. But investigators only found 1 plate recovered in the dishwasher. So Morphew said, you know, he changes his story as investigators start giving him evidence.
Yeah.
And Barry Morphew says that, you know, he must have hand washed it, his own plate. But then later on, he said that they shared a plate, according to investigators in the preliminary hearing. Another thing that was really interesting, he told CBI that he showered at the house before leaving that Sunday morning and then showered again at the hotel when he arrived. And he said, quote, "Showers relax me."
Yeah. It was also interesting, too, going back to his comments about, you know, they had a perfectly good night because she hadn't been drinking. He said that she started drinking the moment the girls left to go on their trip, and she was drinking the entire time. So I just thought that was very interesting as well, that he implied Saturday, the day before she went missing, that she wasn't drunk, she was fine, there was no alcohol, but then says she was drinking the whole time.
He also said that he changed shirts a lot, all the time, and he didn't recall changing shirts that Mother's Day, Sunday. But again, investigators already knew how many times he had changed shirts when they looked at the surveillance video from the hotel room. Like every time he went into the hotel room, he had a different shirt on.
Yeah. He even makes a comment
Someone's
later.
asking if Suzanne had a drinking problem. I do not believe so.
Yeah. But he does make a comment later in another interview when asked why he changed his shirts one of the times, and it was because he was wearing a black one and changed into a gray one, and he said that the gray would reflect the sun differently or whatever, basically implying he wouldn't be hot in a gray shirt. So in that moment, he was aware that he was changing clothes and the reason why. But then in this interview on this date, he didn't remember changing his shirt at all.
Okay, let's move on to the evidence. So we're on page 28 now. That spy pen was found on May 20th. So really early into the investigation among women's bras. And on May 24th, the detectives started reviewing the audio on the spy pen. Yep. So that's when they kind of learn about this Jeff character. And, oh, hi, AK, thank you. So there's a recording on the spy pen from March 22nd from Barry Morphew's truck. It was a trip to Pueblo. He was listening to multiple episodes of the Forensic Files. The killing of Vicki Lynn Hoskinson, I hope I'm saying that right, who went missing after riding her bike. It's like foreshadowing. Discussion included the location of her body in Tucson being a remote location and how animals had scavenged her bones. Another forensic file that he listened to allegedly was a case of Walter Scott, who had an affair with a woman named Suzanne. So again, we have not heard these spy pen recordings. They also had to, I don't know if alter is the right way, but make them sound like, bring out the audio better, because it was really hard to hear because of Barry's truck is so loud.
Yeah, and there were some things that they couldn't hear at all.
And that's one of the things that the defense was upset about, because it was a discovery violation because allegedly the defense had only gotten the original and not the enhanced version of the spy pen recordings. There was also a conversation with Jeff trying to meet up around Valentine's Day, and Suzanne had messaged Jeff Libler saying that I'm the one that started the whole ball rolling. I mean, there's a lot that went on last week that I haven't told you about, and not good stuff. So I really think he feels bad about that too. You are not a homewrecker. You are my lover, my sweet friend, and the man I love dearly. And Jeff Libler says, okay. I won't. I just want you to be happy. That's all. Suzanne replied, I'm looking at the man who makes me happy. These are conversations. So for some reason, I don't have the date of that one. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't mentioned. So more evidence was from County Road 105 search in reference to Mary Branson, the woman who sound the heavy machinery that happened really late. In the affidavit, it states that it was late Saturday, but from my interview with Mary Branson, she had said that it was, that the next morning, the very next morning, that she went over there to ask the people that were working there if they left the keys in the machinery, because she was worried that someone had taken equipment late the night before. And I had found out from my other interviews with some other people who worked on that site that they didn't work on that site on Sunday, Mother's Day. So if she went there the following next morning to ask the workers about that, hearing the machinery late at night, then it had to have been Saturday morning. So then she heard it Friday night.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clear that up. It's different in the affidavit, but from my interviews with Mary Branson and other people, that's my understanding. There was a lot of Facebook friend requests. Friday, the May 8th at 9:04 p.m. until Saturday, May 9th at 6:01 p.m. And Suzanne had received over 20 friend requests,
Sent.
No, this is right.
Oh, yeah.
She had received over 20 friend requests in 2020, but she initiated no friend requests until May 8th. And 20 men were friend requested, 3 of them with the first name of Jeff. Yeah. But though Jeff Libler was not on the list, I want to make that very clear. And that 3 women were new friend requests as well.
Yeah.
So there was 23 total from May 8th through May 9th, and 20 were men, 3 were women. 3 of the men had the first name Jeff. That's very important. I think that's going to be, obviously hit on hard during the trial. And one of the people received a request from Suzanne's account on May 10th at 10:12 a.m. That's interesting too. Again, I had said this earlier that Suzanne's Range Rover has not been completely, the data has not been, it wasn't mentioned much in here.
Yeah.
So it's like they still need to do some work on that.
And all of those friend requests that she sent, most of them were guys that she knew from high school or from 20 years ago back in Indiana. And all of
brother's
them,
friends that are older.
Yeah. Even some of Barry's friends that she never really even talked to. And they all thought it was very, very odd that she was friend requesting them because they either never really talked to her in high school or, they were Barry's friends. So they thought it was odd that Suzanne was adding them 20 years later. But all of them just thought it was really weird and out of the norm for her. And I guess one of the guys had mentioned that some of the people from the high school were kind of rumoring that they were having issues and thought that Barry might be in financial trouble and stuff like that. So a lot of people that they went to high school with were already kind of talking about, the problems they were having in their marriage.
Something interesting also from data from Suzanne's and Barry's cell phones was that from 5:41 p.m. Friday, May 8th through Sunday, May 10th, 11 calls were made between the two. Mm-hmm. All calls were outgoing from Barry Morphew to Suzanne, and out of 58 voicemails on his cell phone, none of them were from Suzanne. And Barry Morphew deleted numerous calls between Suzanne and Barry Morphew from May 4th through the 5th. And he, when he was asked about that, he said he didn't recall.
Yeah, he said he was probably just freeing up space on his phone or something like that.
Also, this is very interesting, is that Suzanne's password was reset the night of May 8th. So again, 2 days before she's reported missing, her cell phone password, either her password on her phone or Facebook, I think it was her Facebook, was reset the night of May 8th. Morphew was asked if he ever searched online to meet other women. Morphew replied, no, never, absolutely not, never. And on page 33, there's a history of his search records.
And 32.
Yeah. I don't want to read those. If you want to read them, I think people should just go read them on their own.
Yep.
This
is the PG version.
Yeah. On May 4th, 2020 at 4:04 p.m., there's a 3-second call between Barry Morphew and Suzanne. This is the first logged call from in Barry's phone to or from Suzanne since February 7th of 2020. They went from February 7th to May 4th not talking to each other on the phone?
Yeah, I find, well, because he admitted that he deleted calls on May 4th and 5th, but even before that, I mean, your husband and wife, how are you not communicating for months and there's just no
But wait,
record
there's
of
a
it?
Second device.
Yep.
But they don't understand, or
Yep.
they don't know exactly what that second device is. That's another piece of evidence that I think, obviously, they're going to look more into before the trial.
Yeah.
An additional 6 calls were made that day. I'm talking about May 4th until 6:07 p.m. And this is Suzanne's phone records account for 8. So 2 of those calls were deleted.
Yeah.
We're on page 33. On May 6th, between 8:06 a.m. and 8:13 a.m., before the "I'm done" text that Barry Morphew had called Suzanne 6 consecutive times. So before Suzanne even sent the "I'm done" text, he's calling her
Constantly.
Yeah, that is a short amount of time. That is only. Wait, I'm not great with math. 8:06 a.m. to 8:13 to call someone 6 times. That's a lot.
Yeah.
From 2:43 p.m. to 5 p.m., Suzanne received 4 messages, and
Barry.
From Barry, and they were deleted from Barry's phone. And it says, "When I'm dead, going to see my Savior, this life on earth is mere grain of sand compared to eternity." And these are what, the prosecution call like his suicide texts.
Yeah.
And Barry Morphew's phone had abnormally high in frequency during the late night and early morning hours of May 8th through the 9th and May 9th through the 10th at the Morphew house. We're on page 34.
Yep.
On May 9th at 1:51 p.m., Barry Morphew calls Suzanne, and it only lasted 2 seconds. This is the 10th of 11 consecutive calls on May 9th. On May 10th, from 3:25 a.m. to 3:48 a.m., Suzanne is supposedly sleeping, and Barry Morphew's trucks has over 80 events involving his truck during this time.
The doors opening and closing.
That could
all the
mean
doors.
his brake lights are coming on. That's an event. His door opening. That's an event. So he had over 80 events involving his truck. And again, he had told investigators he had set an alarm for 4:30.
Yeah.
And then later he said he woke up on his own, but he left around 5. So then why is his truck doing that so early in the morning?
And he even suggested that maybe Suzanne was doing something with it. And then when they brought up, his phone moving around prior to him waking up at 4:30, he suggested, he goes to the bathroom a lot in the middle of the night. But obviously that doesn't correlate to then his truck having activity, so.
Something else that was really interesting on page 33, it's a screenshot of a text message from Suzanne to Barry. I don't know if you can read that. But if you go to that page, it says, "Oh, I'm sure your mistress has you all happy now, so you can say you love me but bully me when you're with me. Yeah, that's love." This is a text from Suzanne Again, a deleted image. And I think maybe, you know, there was a lot of talks early on that Barry Morphew had a mistress, and maybe this is why investigators were really questioning Morgan Gentile to see if she was the mistress. And you know, Morgan Gentile told me and told investigators multiple times that she was never a mistress, that she was just an employee of Barry Morphew. So I just wanted to make that note that, you know, if they got this, and this was a text message from Suzanne to Barry on April 24th. So we're going back to now page 35. At 8:46 a.m., hotel surveillance sees Barry Morphew walking into the hotel room carrying 2 white trash bags, a khaki backpack, a pair of boots, a dark colored item, and a piece of clothing with blue teal coloring. I underlined this because we got to see the photo in color, but in the affidavit it's black and white, so you can't really tell the color. And the color of that piece of clothing matches very closely to the photos that Suzanne would take on her bike rides, and she's wearing a jacket.
And Barry often said that she liked to match, and that was a jacket that she wore very often, was that teal colored jacket.
We're getting this information from the arrest affidavit. If you haven't read it, it's 130 pages nearly, and you should read it, but we're giving a quick summary as best we can. Okay, from 10:50 a.m. until 11:17 a.m. This is on Mother's Day, May 10th. The morning Suzanne is disappeared. 27 minutes. Barry Morphew is at the Men's Warehouse parking lot. His driver and passenger doors open and close at least 7 times. And again, Barry Morphew does not mention this trash run at all to investigators. And he always says he can't recall what happened there.
He only remembers going to McDonald's, the hotel, and the job site. So there were some pieces that were left out.
At 8:41 a.m., I'm going a little before that, he texts Suzanne, "I made it to Broomfield, call me when you get a chance." But still no response from her. At noon, 12:06 p.m., Barry calls Mallory. This is probably when Mallory is, you know, expressing her concerns about she can't get a hold of Mom. I said,